Welcome to the Fail It Forward podcast. Lessons for life, leadership, and turning failure into success. I'm John Lowry, your host, and I'm excited about what this podcast will do. This is a podcast that is looking at how it is that we take the failures that are just part of life and how people have turned those failures into moments of great success, how those failures have been teaching tools and have been moments of closed doors that open new doors and taught them the things that they would need to be successful. We're excited this episode to have John Schroer be our guest. John Schroer was the former mayor of Franklin, Tennessee, was the commissioner of transportation for the state of Tennessee. Before that, he enjoyed a long career in commercial real estate. But his story of success is not one that excludes failure. In fact, his story of success is one that has many, many failures along the way. It's a journey that many of us have taken to where before we experience the great success, we experience failures. And yet it's learning from those failures that becomes so important. And John Schroer is someone that took those failures, got the lessons out of them, and then turned those into great success going forward. On this episode, you'll learn about 6 character traits that John learned and discovered about himself. Some of them in this intimate moment in a conversation with God after he had literally filed for the largest bankruptcy in the state of Tennessee history. It was in this moment that 6 things emerged from which he then started a life of public service and went forward serving in very, very significant positions. It's these 6 things that you will hear him talk about made him who he is, which is far more important than what he does. And you'll also learn about the power of a golf swing and how something as simple as golf, a hobby, a talent, can be used to develop character that ultimately will allow one to be successful. And so today in this conversation will be a fun conversation as we dig into these 6 things and we learn some of the lessons that failure has to teach us. John Schroer, it is great to see you, my friend. It has been way, way too long. This crazy COVID-19 stuff has just kept friends away from each other. And it's just a thrill this morning to have the opportunity to have you here for some conversation about failure and overcoming failure in order to generate success. How have you been?
Well, it's the first time I've even had a coat on forever. I haven't worn a tie in 2 years. I mostly wear jeans or sweatpants. And so I've been really good, actually.
Well, you're retired now, and you're retired from a very long and distinguished career, both in business and in public service. You've served as the mayor of Franklin, Tennessee, one of the large suburbs of Nashville. You served as commissioner of transportation for the state of Tennessee and has did an incredible job there. And then prior to that, you were in private business and did a lot in commercial real estate and other things.
Don't forget, I was chairman of the school board.
Chairman of the school board. We're going to get to that.
For
Absolutely.
a while as well.
I want to know, and we're going to dig into the school board conversation because I think it's a really interesting part of your story. But as we think about this particular podcast, we're really thinking about people out there who have overcome failure and have done so in a way to where they experienced failure, but then they use that failure as an opportunity to learn and to grow, and through that ultimately achieved tremendous success. And I know a little bit about your story, and I'm eager for those listening to this podcast to hear that story as well, because your story wasn't a direct line A to Z in terms of start to success. It had a few bumps and a few twists and turns along the way. Share with us a little bit about your experience and that moment where you experienced failure in a big way.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think anyone has achieved success without failure. I just don't think you haven't, even if you everyone has failure in their life. And one of the things I used to talk about on the school board, which I was on, was that we as parents, oftentimes, I think our generation is pushing success without including failure. When everybody gets a trophy now, everybody gets a ribbon. We can't give anybody a failing grade. We can't. We want to make everybody feel good about themselves. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I gave this kind of idea to a commencement speech one time, and I said, the thing that I think I do best is fail. And I said, I had a PhD in failure, and that's the only thing I've got a PhD in. And, it's a hard way to start something, but if everybody goes back and looks at their lives and how they do things, and some of my failures I am not at all proud of, but they are who I am. And I think we have to accept that in our lives, and we can't. And I think the other thing, you can't ever look back. You can't, okay, so I made a decision. It was a bad decision. So let's go on. When I was at TDOT, we used to learn, we almost celebrated failure. And because I would make people actually talk about their failures in group sessions. When I had 40 some odd department heads, and we'd have monthly department meetings, and I would pick out someone and make them talk about their failure on a project or what happened, so that everyone else could maybe learn from it. We can learn from someone else's failures, and I think that's critical, important. Mine started early. It started in the 4th grade. I wanted to play baseball, and I went to try. And back then, you had to try out for sports. Now you don't try. If you want to join a team, you're on a team no matter what, and you play the same amount as anybody else. Again, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but that's not life, and so we as parents have to prepare our children for life, and we have to prepare ourselves for life as well. And as we get older, that's it's up to us. It's not up to our parents. But I tried out for that baseball team, and there were 20 kids, or there were boys at that point in time, and they kept 12 or what. Well, I got cut. And I remember vividly walking home from my school to my house. It was about a mile walk, crying the whole way. My parents weren't there; they both worked, and so I was on my own. And I decided, well, baseball wasn't going to be my sport because I got cut from the 4th grade baseball, and I started putting my efforts into golf. I played golf as well, and ultimately that proved to be great because I ended up being a relatively good golfer. I played statewide golf in high school, and I actually played golf for Indiana University. I wasn't great. I wasn't the best on the team, but I made the team. I was a walk-on. They didn't have scholarships much back then in golf. I was a walk-on, played a couple years until I failed in something else again. And then went from there. So, that was my first and still very memorable failure. So,
yeah, failure can be a great guide, can it? In terms of shutting doors to certain routes in life, but opening doors to others. And I know many, and even in my own life, there have been moments where you look back and you go, that didn't work out. And boy, am I glad that it didn't work out, because it opened the door to something even more significant. You had one of those moments even in your business life where there was a pretty significant failure that happened, but it literally opened a door to a whole nother chapter of your life that went exceptionally well. Tell us about that.
So the one that happened to me was I was at the point in time I had started a real estate development company. I partnered with someone, and we were doing great. It was in the mid 80s, and real estate was going crazy. The company that I owned, in conjunction with somebody else, I was half owner, was ranked the 76th largest retail development company in the United States at the time. And so we were blowing and going, and I was one cocky SOB. And, I felt like I had the golden touch and things were going great. And, I had 2 Mercedes and a big house, and I was 38 years old. And I think at this point in time, the good Lord said to me, "You're getting too big for your britches." I do believe that, and all, and then so he hit me upside the head with a 2x4. It takes me a 2x4 to learn rather than a gentle nudge, and the real estate market crashed because of change in tax laws. The Bush 41 tax laws had a huge impact on the real estate market, and we were blowing and going, and it just shut it down. And unfortunately, I had to file bankruptcy. And I owed at the time some $80-odd million, and that I was personally accountable for. And I just didn't have $80 million to pay back, and so my only option, quite frankly, was to file bankruptcy. And we did, or I did. My wife didn't have to, but I did. And so when you file bankruptcy in Tennessee, we have some of the toughest bankruptcy laws in the country. You're allowed $4,000 out of your bankruptcy. So everything I owned was taken away from me: my house, my cars, furniture. I mean, they just had a big old sale, and it was a large bankruptcy in Tennessee. It was unfortunately on the front page of the Tennessean, and an inside fold on top of that. And I wasn't the only one. Dave Ramsey did it about the same time I did. Now he took that success into much better than I did, I guess. But we were both in the real estate business, both doing the same thing. And so I don't want to attach myself to Dave Ramsey, but there were other people that went through those same experiences. So those are tough times. I mean, personally, as a man, I come from the generation. And I hope people don't get offended by this, but my dad taught me that my job is to take care of my family, period. And my wife was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and so men have this ego that's tough, and mine was bad enough. But when all of a sudden you can't provide for your family, it's hard. And with bankruptcy goes a whole lot of things. At one point in time, and I'm certainly not proud of this, prior to bankruptcy, all the people that my companies owed money to filed lawsuits against me. And at one point in time, I had over 400 lawsuits filed against me. And they were all served at my house, and my wife had to take the serving of the paper. And I'll say this today, she's a good woman, and we've been married now for 38 years, and during that time, she said to me, when you're feeling down, she said, "Well, I was born poor, I can be poor again." And we went on from there. So those were tough times, but and this is kind of where the story kind of takes a couple turns. But when you're laying in bed at nighttime and you go to sleep and then you wake up, you always are able to go to sleep. It's just that when you wake up at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock and your mind starts going, I call them when the demons come. I couldn't sleep a lot. And so I'd go and read, or I'd go whatever. And one night, it was, I had no options. I didn't have any money coming in. I had lost my house. I was living in a rental house. Actually, it wasn't even a rental house. A builder of mine, a friend of mine who'd gone broke, had empty houses, and he let me stay in one. And I had to get my mother-in-law to co-sign on a note to borrow money so my wife could have a car. And I had $100 junker to drive around in. And so, anyway, so I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got a MBA in business. I'd had that, but the only thing I knew was real estate. Real estate was crashing, and everything that I had thought about or thought I was going to have was gone. And so I had an epiphany, and I think it was a message from God. And it was in the middle of the night, and God said to me, "John, you're kind of stupid, but I'll forgive you for that, because but you're worried about the things that people have taken away from you." And God said to me, "You need to worry about what you still have left." And I thought about that for a while, and he said, "You need to worry about the things that no one can take away from you, period. That they belongs totally to you. None of those things are physical. People, if their house is burned down, those things are gone. So none of the things that I started thinking about it that day are physical, and there's 6 things. And we will show one time I brought a little prompt because I believe in these 6 things. So this was in 1989 when this happened. But those 6 things are faith, family, and friends, which everybody says that. Everybody and most people believe in that. And you know, maybe it's family, faith, friends. I don't really, but faith and family are right there, and friends are critical as we go along. And we learn in life who our friends really are. The more we fail, the more we understand who our friends are and who they aren't. And that's important. But the other 3 were very personal. And I realized what was important to me were those 3 things. One, and then the 4th one is like, and I don't like to say intelligence, but your experiences in life and your raw intelligence. I mean, those experiences that you have, whether failures, successes, or whatever, are yours, and they're yours alone and nobody else's. And you can use those to grow with, or you can use them to fail again, or to feel bad about yourself. And so that's critical. The other 2 are mine. The 5th one is my sense of humor. I've always had a good sense of humor. My mother was really, really funny. My dad was pretty funny too. And so I've always used my humor to get through things. And I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist. And my last one was my golf swing. And you know, I use golf. I didn't use it for business. I don't think you use golf for business. I used it to relax and to compete. I was competitive even as I got older. I played in state amateurs and the state open. And so as I got older, I was still competitive and made a lot of friends. In fact, most of my male friends are golf friends. And so I that night and then the next morning, I wrote those all down and I said, okay, these are the 6 things I'm going to put all my efforts into for the rest of my life. And I'm not going to worry about anything else. And I did. I mean, that was what I did. And I had maybe moved away from God a little bit during those times. And we, both my wife and I, kind of recommitted ourselves. And we grew stronger through this. We have learned, my wife is going through a cancer issue right now. And we've learned that through these bad times, we get closer instead of further apart. Children, you know, can either bring you closer or further apart. You know, we grew closer as we went along. And so, you know, those are the things that I just put all of my efforts into, and you know, remarkably, things have turned out well.
So let me go back to those 6 things for just a minute and talk a little bit about how each was a building block for ultimately what was to come.
Oh, sure.
In terms of a life of public service and a very distinguished life of public service. I want to get to that in just a second, but let's talk about each one of these things.
Well, family, well, faith might be where I needed to start. Is, you know, we did recommit. We started going to church regularly. My wife and I both started reading a little bit more than we could, and praying more, and that continues in our life now through ups and downs. And it also helped me. You know, I was asked in my church I went on a mission trip. I went on 3 mission trips through my church. 1 to Mexico and 2 to Guatemala, and that changed my life as well. And I saw things that I never otherwise would have experienced, and opened my eyes to third world countries. And, you know, my wife did not too long ago, we did a mission trip to Kathmandu, and she was working with orphanages there. And so all those things have brought that together. But my friends in the church, I was chair of the site selection and building committee of our new church, First United Methodist Church in Franklin. And I spent years doing that. So those were rewarding, you know, and so those are good. My family, you know, I started committing time to my family. When I filed bankruptcy, I didn't have a job. So I had a son in kindergarten at the time. And I started going to have lunch with my son at kindergarten, and I got to know his teacher a little bit more, and she found out that I was pretty handy, and that she asked me to build a reading loft in her kindergarten class, and so I did that, and then the principal found out I was heading. They wanted me to help them build a playground, and I did that, and then I was asked to help with building the Tinkerbell playground, which is a community-built playground at Pinkerton Park, and it was a huge undertaking. And then one day there was an opening in the school board. Someone left, and I was reading a newspaper, and I saw that, and I kind of felt like that was kind of a message from God, and said, "You need to do this." So and the message was, you probably won't be a very good den mother, and so you need to use your skills where they're best. And I had despite of a bankruptcy, I had a pretty good business background, and so I decided to put my name in the hat to run for the school board. Now, that was because there was vacancy. The existing school board appointed the replacement until the next election. So I put my name in. There were 4 or 5 other people that put their name in, and I didn't get it, and it made me really mad because I'm very competitive on top of everything else. So when the election came around, I put my name in, ran for election, and won the election. And I ended up spending 13 years on the school board and 11 as the chairman of the school board. And I was also on the Tennessee School Boards Association and was the treasurer and vice president-elect. And I didn't get to be president because I decided to run for mayor before I became president of the Tennessee School Boards Association.
And then you were mayor of Franklin for how long?
Well, for 3.5 years, so not as long as I thought. I was planning on being mayor for a long time, and I was not happy with what was going on in the city, and a bunch of business leaders got together and said, we want to have somebody run for mayor, a business person run for mayor, and everybody's looking around and said, well, who could we get? And then somebody said, well, maybe Schroer can do it because he's the only one who's run for political office and been elected. And had some name recognition. And the school board's budget at the time was actually bigger than the city's budget, so I was used to running an organization. So after talking to my wife quite a bit, we decided to run for mayor, and that was hard. Campaigning's tough, and it was a kind of a bitter election, and I hate that, but it was. But we beat an incumbent mayor. 2-1, and which was kind of surprising for a lot of people, and we took over that. I'll take a quick aside. I had Bob Corker, Senator Corker, called me up right after the election, and I'd never met Senator Corker before. It was nice of him to call, and he said we passed, he'd call me and I'd call him. We'd miss, and finally we connected later in the afternoon. This is the day after election. He goes, John, this is Senator Corker, Bob Corker. I said, well, hey, how you doing? He said, I've had like 10 or 15 calls today from people that have asked me about the election in Franklin. From the outside looking in, Franklin's doing great, everything's good, and there's an incumbent mayor, and, it's one of the fastest growing cities, and it's got businesses coming in, and all of a sudden, he said, and then somebody who nobody's ever heard of, you ran against an incumbent mayor who a lot of people heard of, and you won 2-1. And he goes, who are you?
That's great.
And so that's kind of the start of my kind of elected political career. And then 3.5 years later, I was called by the governor-elect Haslam, and he asked me to join his cabinet to be the commissioner of transportation.
And did that for 8 years, and then since retired. Let me ask you this question. So as you reflect back, there's obviously things that you can see now that you couldn't see in the midst of the dark moments or the nights with the demons. What is it that you see now that you look back and you go, wow, there was something at work there that I never saw that was really valuable for me, to where you almost perhaps appreciate some of the journey as you look back on it today?
You know, the thing that I think about a lot, and I think a lot of people ought to reflect on this, and it can be narrowed down into a sentence, and the sentence is, it's not what you do, it's who you are.
Wow.
And I think about that a lot, and that's really I've pulled all of those 6 things down into that sentence. None of them have anything to do with what I do. And I will tell you that in my office, I never had pictures of me with political leaders, or I've had meetings with President Trump and with other people, and everybody would always say, "You want to have a picture?" and even if I had a picture, I'd just put it in a drawer. I never put anything on the walls to talk about who I am. I don't want people to necessarily recognize me as a mayor or a commissioner or those things. I want people to recognize me as a good person, someone who cares about others, and is interested in the success of other people as I am about the success of mine. And my success doesn't have anything to do with my house or, how much money I have. And it has to do with those 6 things.
Yeah. What would you tell, as I think about COVID-19, I had 2 last week that reached out to me that I became aware of personally, of small business owners primarily that realized that their business wasn't going to make it through COVID. And they were grieving, I guess would be the best way to say, which is fair, right? And frankly, their business was a healthy business. They never could have foreseen this coming, but they just weren't able to figure out how to last long enough to be able to see the recovery. And yet, as they were reflecting on it, it felt like a failure for them. What would you say to folks that are experiencing failure right now? And what would be a word that you would give them to inspire them to keep going or to be looking for that next thing?
So if you go back and look up failure and people that failed, and everybody, Albert Einstein and Michael Jordan and all these people who are great success will tell you that failure is a part of their lives, and that it's just a building block of any failure, and successes are building blocks. I used to tell people that work for me when we'd have those meetings and we talk about failure, I said, so how many of you all have made a bad decision and something went wrong? And the bad decision can be you just had bad information. As long as that decision wasn't to be hurtful or anything. If you felt like it was a good decision at the time and you made it with all the information that you had at the time and it became a failure, the couple of things that you do is you lay in bed that night or the next night and you think, especially as a bad decision, I'll never do that again. And I said, so how many of y'all lay in bed and after you made a good decision, you say, well, I'm going to do that again? You don't do that. You just don't say, God, that was really good. I want to do that one more time. You learn the most from your failures.
One of the lessons that your story has taught me, and I'd love for you to build on it just a little bit here, is the connection between character and success, and character as the driver for success. And you talk about how, at the end of all of this, you were going to pursue these 6 things, which were, maybe with the exception of the golf swing, but maybe the golf swing even at some level, were really character-driven kind of things. But it was in the pursuit of those things that ultimately there was a life of public service that emerged that was really, really successful. Talk about that correlation between character and success.
I learned a lot from my wife, and she's a bright person.
Yes.
I went on it was related to golf. I went on a golf trip with a bunch of people, bunch of men. It was to Hilton Head. It was a golf tournament, the Sea Pines golf tournament, and we had a bunch of people. Well, some of the men maybe didn't behave the way they should have. And it was really interesting is that I ran into a very, very dear friend of my wife's at a place, and it's like, if I was not behaving, that would have been her first phone call to my wife. And I thought about that, but then I thought about these other men, and I went home and I told my wife about it. And, she said, I'll tell you what, you can do whatever you want to do and I'll be fine with it. But the first people you have to tell are your children. And that just, wow. And so I really started thinking about decisions that I make, even in business. Sometimes we're faced with decisions that are maybe gray, you could go one way or the other. And, you know which is the right thing to do and which is the wrong thing to do, but one may have financial implications, and I used to say, and people, the WWJD thing, what would Jesus do? And I used to say, I don't have any idea what Jesus would do. He is without sin, and how could I decide what Jesus would do? So I actually changed that to, what would my children think? And so, telling your child something is hard. And the worse that you do, the harder it becomes, because children just look at things the way they are. And so, through that whole thing, I decided in business and in my political career that the only answer is you just do what's right, period. Regardless of the outcome. Regardless of the outcome, you do what's right. And when I was running TDOT and when I was a mayor, I didn't, the thing about it is I didn't care whether I got fired or reelected. It made no difference to me whatsoever, because it doesn't matter what I do. It matters who I am.
Wow.
And so if you have that in your heart, and you truly have it in your heart, and people would say to me, well, the governor's not going to like that. I said, well, then he can just fire me. I don't care, because I wasn't even looking for this job when I got it. So, but I can go home to my wife, and I can go home to my children, and I can face myself and know that I made the right decision. And since all that happened to me, that's how I live my life. And I make a lot of people mad. I mean, there's a lot of people in the legislature who are happy to see me go, because I didn't bow to that. And I will knock on wood, if there's any here, Governor Haslam didn't do that either. Uh-huh. And people say, well, I'm going to call the governor. I said, well, here's his cell phone number. You go ahead and call him, because he also believed in doing what was right. And so it's hard to do that. But our political people, they're worried about getting reelected. And we see it in Washington right now. We're worried about getting reelected.
Yeah.
That's all we worry about. We don't worry about the health or the well-being of our people. They worry about their jobs. They worry about what they're doing.
As we're winding down here, I want to reflect back on the 6 things. And I think 5 of the 6 people would probably go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. The one that you just talked a little bit more about is the golf swing. Talk a little bit about, what has the golf swing done for you that more than anything it's helped you do as far as golf achievements, what has the golf swing done for you that has made a difference in your success, both in your personal life as well as in your professional life?
Well, I started playing golf when I was 6. My mother taught me how to play. She was a great golfer, and my dad was a good one. My mother was better than my father. And I played in high school and college. It gave me great confidence, and it it exhibits everything in life. You have successes, you have failures, everything. Golf is the sport that you fail at the most. And look, somebody can have a all-star career and win 7 tournaments in their life, professional tournaments, and that's a great career. Now, you throw out the Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus's and those kind of people, but Jim Furyk, I think, has won 10 tournaments or 11 tournaments. I mean, all of those things. So, which means, and out of 300 tournaments that they might have played in a career, they won 6. That's a horrible percentage. You're worse than the Jets if you were that way. And so, so it teaches you to fail, and it teaches you to fail. Interestingly enough, it's one of the few sports that you're walking side by side the person that you're competing with and want to beat the most. And you congratulate them on a good shot, and you're gracious when you lose. Maybe we have an ex-president who might have been more gracious when he lost. But being gracious when you lose is a character builder. And, my parents were avid about that. And in golf, it's the only sport that you call penalties on yourself. Sure. Yeah. No one ever does that. Who does that? I mean, it's amazing what they do in that regard. And so it teaches you self-respect and self-discipline and all those kind of good things. But, so that's that. And from a personal standpoint, but it's just mine. And the interesting thing about golf, it doesn't matter what anybody else does, period. It's one of the few sports, swimming and track and field, but in most cases, you're competing physically against someone else. And someone could have, be better than you, stronger than you, or whatever. In golf, the guy that tees off, if you're on a par 3 and the guy in front of you that you're trying to beat hits a hole in one, there's no reason you can't hit a hole in one either. What he does not stop you from doing anything. So it's all personal. So now you don't have to depend on anyone else. It's just you. And that I learned the most from. And on a business side, I used golf, but only differently because when you play around a golf with somebody, you've reached a different level with them personally. Before COVID, you rode in a golf cart. now you're riding your separate car, which I don't like because, most of the what I read somewhere. So you spend something like a minute or 2 minutes in a round of golf actually hitting the golf ball. The rest, you're not doing anything. And so you spend a lot of time with people that you play golf with. And you know me well enough. I want to know about you. I want to know who your kids are, what they're doing, how many grandchildren, children, all that kind of good stuff. And so from the first hole to the 18th hole, I learn a whole lot about people, and they learn a whole lot about me. And in that same 18th hole, I can tell you whether I want to do business with this person or not. How they react on a golf course. Do they throw their clubs? Do they cuss and get mad and do all? I don't want to do business with somebody like that. But if they're gracious and they not that you should get mad, but you get over it and you go on to the next hole. And then the next time you call that person, you have a different relationship. Better than going to lunch, better than having a meeting. You have transcended the business meeting to a personal meeting, and that changes the perspective of the meeting. And that's how I used golf.
Well, John, this has been an absolute blast, and I so appreciate you coming in and having this conversation. Your story is inspiring, but your willingness to share it and to do so transparently, I know it has been encouraging to me over the years as I've reflected on that story, and I know will be encouraging to many others. Thank you not only for what you do and what you have done, but also thank you for who you are. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to have our friendship as part of my life and the opportunity to work with you in terms of helping some of the leaders in your organizations. And I wish you the very, very best going forward, and enjoy retirement, my friend.
It's been an experience. I'm starting to get used to it.
Thank you much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.